on September 14th, 1962, a message reached a young man living deep beneath the Alps. The experiment was over. Michel Siffre did not believe it. He had entered the cave on July 16. The team above knew exactly how many days had passed. They had clocks, calendars, sunrise, sunset, meals, conversations, and ordinary life. Siffre had none of those things. As far as he could tell, it was still August 20. He believed he had almost another month underground. That was not the result he had gone looking for. Siffre was 23 years old, trained as a geologist, and originally interested in an underground glacier. His first plan was simple: spend a short period beneath the surface and study the cave. Then he changed the question: what if he stayed much longer and removed the one thing almost no human can escape? Time cues. No watch, no calendar, no sunrise, no sunset, no one telling him the hour. He would sleep when he felt tired, eat when he felt hungry, and call a team at the surface when he woke, ate, or prepared to sleep. The team could record those moments, but they would not tell him what time it was outside. The cave became a strange kind of clockless laboratory. The simplicity was part of the power. There was no artificial day imposed on him and no clock he could secretly glance at. His schedule was allowed to emerge from hunger, fatigue, wakefulness, and whatever sense of duration remained. That made every call to the surface a comparison between two timelines, the one recorded above ground and the one Siffre was living below. And at first, the prediction seems obvious. Without clocks, your schedule might become messy. You might wake later. You might eat at strange hours. You might lose track of whether it was Tuesday or Wednesday. But surely you would still feel the difference between 1 month and 2. Siffre thought he could. Then came a tiny test. Whenever he contacted the surface, he sometimes counted from 1 to 120, trying to move at roughly one number per second. If his estimate was accurate, the task should take about 2 minutes. At one point, it took about 5. 5 real minutes had passed while Siffre experienced something much closer to 2. That is the first answer. Take away the clocks, and conscious time can drift. But that answer immediately creates a problem, because his body had not stopped keeping time. Siffre still woke up. He still became hungry. He still became sleepy. He still moved through repeating cycles of activity and rest. His 1962 observations suggested a sleep-wake rhythm slightly longer than 24 hours, roughly 24 and a half hours. So one clock seemed to survive, another did not. And that difference is where the real story begins. When people say your body has an internal clock, it is easy to imagine a tiny stopwatch somewhere in the brain, silently measuring seconds, minutes, days, and months. That is not what a circadian clock does. Circadian rhythms are repeating biological changes that run on a roughly 24-hour cycle. They help organize things like sleepiness, alertness, hormone release, body temperature, appetite, and digestion. These rhythms are generated inside the body, but they do not normally operate in isolation. Every day, the environment corrects them. Light is the strongest cue. Morning arrives. Brightness changes. Darkness returns. Meals happen at familiar times. Activity changes. Other people wake up, work, eat, talk, and go to bed. The world keeps nudging the biological clock back toward the 24-hour day. Siffre removed many of those nudges. His body did not become timeless. Instead, it began to free run. That explains why his sleep schedule could slide away from the solar day. But it still does not explain the most disturbing part. Why did September 14 feel like August 20? A circadian rhythm can help determine when you become sleepy. It does not automatically tell you how many days of your life have passed. For that, the brain faces a different problem. Think about last month. You probably do not remember 30 separate, equally sized blocks labeled Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. You remember events. A trip, a conversation, a deadline, a meal somewhere unusual. A morning when you woke late. A night when you could not sleep. A change in weather. A message. A mistake. A surprise. Those changes become landmarks. And when you later ask yourself how much time seems to have passed, memory helps build the answer. This produces one of the strangest features of human time. A boring hour can feel painfully slow while you are inside it, but a boring month can feel strangely short when you look back. In the moment, boredom directs attention toward time. You notice every minute. In memory, monotony gives you fewer distinctive events to retrieve. Days with similar structure can collapse together. Time can drag while it is happening and disappear after it is over. Now return to Siffre's cave. The environment changed very little. There was no sunrise separating one morning from the next. No weekend. No workday. No evening news. No train to catch. No appointment at 4. No friend saying, "See you tomorrow." He had activities. He read, wrote, ate, slept, worked, and communicated with the surface. But many of the ordinary markers that divide life into recognizable pieces were gone. Siffre later described the darkness as something close to one long day. That description matters, because his error was not simply a broken ability to count seconds. It appeared at more than one scale. Minutes could feel shorter than they were, and weeks could compress into what felt like a much smaller block of life. This is where the obvious explanation changes. At first, the cave seems to be a story about losing clocks. It is really a story about losing synchronization. One kind of synchronization happens between the body's circadian system and the 24-hour world. Another happens between memory and the stream of events that lets us organize the past, and another comes from other people. Human life is full of shared time. School starts. Shops open. Messages arrive. Someone expects you somewhere. A television program begins. A birthday comes back around. Even when you never look at a clock, other people keep handing you information about where you are in the day, the week, and the year. Siffre had deliberately weakened that network. The surface team could hear from him, but they could not rescue his timeline by casually saying, "Good morning," or "It is nearly midnight." He had to generate his own schedule from the inside, and the inside was not perfectly aligned with the outside. That is why Siffre's experiment was important historically. He did not discover from nothing that biology can keep rhythm. Scientists had already found endogenous rhythms in other organisms. What his underground work helped make vivid was that human rhythms can persist when familiar external time signals are removed. The body carries timing machinery of its own. Modern circadian science has gone much further. Researchers now know that the brain contains a central circadian clock that coordinates rhythms throughout the body, while light and darkness are major signals that keep those rhythms synchronized with the environment. But the cave also exposed something circadian biology alone cannot fully answer. Your biological clock and your experience of duration are related, but they are not identical. You can be sleepy at roughly the correct point in your internal cycle and still be wrong about how long something lasted. You can know that another sleep period has passed and still misjudge how many calendar days have accumulated. You can even experience time differently depending on whether you are judging it now or reconstructing it later. Siffre had accidentally placed himself at the intersection of those systems, and the longer he remained there, the harder that intersection became to ignore. There is another reason the experiment mattered at that moment in history. In the early 1960s, long-duration confinement was no longer just an explorer's curiosity. Spaceflight had begun. Submarines could keep crews away from ordinary day-night routines for long periods. Military and aerospace planners suddenly cared about a practical question that sounds almost philosophical. If people are separated from the natural day, how should work, sleep, and alertness be organized? Siffre's cave was crude compared with a modern laboratory, but it made that problem visible. The surface could measure clock time. Siffre could report live time. The gap between them became data. And that gap also helps explain why modern researchers separate several different questions that everyday language bundles together. Circadian timing asks where you are in a repeating biological cycle. Interval timing asks how long a short event lasted. Retrospective duration asks how long a past period seems when you reconstruct it from memory. Those systems can disagree. A frightening 5 seconds can feel stretched while it happens. A dull afternoon can feel endless. Yet months of repetitive routine can later seem compressed because few distinct events stand out in memory. That is not a contradiction once you stop treating the sense of time as one instrument. It is a collection of judgments produced for different purposes. The cave stripped away enough normal structure for those judgments to stop agreeing. And once you see that, Siffre's biggest error stops looking like a freak curiosity. It becomes a magnified version of something the brain is doing all the time, estimating duration from incomplete signals, while biological rhythms, attention, memory, emotion, and the outside world keep correcting one another. After 1962, Siffre organized more underground isolation experiments. A decade later, he went underground again himself for a much longer stay in Texas. Those later observations produced dramatic sleep-wake patterns, including periods in which activity and sleep stretched far beyond an ordinary day. But there is an important caution here. Those extreme cave observations should not be turned into the claim that humans naturally possess a 48-hour clock. Modern research describes the human circadian system as roughly 24 hours and strongly shaped by environmental synchronization. Siffre's later cave results were unusual observations under unusual conditions, not a replacement for that broader picture, and that correction makes the original experiment more interesting, not less. Because the real discovery is not that the human clock secretly runs on some bizarre hidden schedule. It is that there is no single thing in your head called time. There are systems that regulate biological rhythms. There are mechanisms for estimating short intervals. There is attention. There is memory. There are emotional states that can stretch or compress experience. And there are environmental and social landmarks that constantly tell you where one period ends and another begins. Most of the time, these systems agree well enough that they feel like one seamless sense. You wake in the morning, your body expects morning, the light says morning, other people behave as if it is morning. Your phone says 7:42. Your memories place yesterday behind you and tomorrow ahead. Everything points in the same direction, so time feels obvious. Siffre's cave pulled those signals apart. His body continued cycling. His conscious estimates drifted. His memories had fewer external landmarks. The people around him could no longer casually synchronize his day, and suddenly the thing that normally feels like one sense of time separated into several different processes. That is why the counting test matters so much. Counting to 120 is almost absurdly simple. No machine, no brain scanner, no complicated equation, just a man in a cave trying to produce 2 minutes, and failing by minutes. It gave the surface team a way to see a private distortion from the outside, but the larger error was even more powerful. On September 14, the world above the cave had completed the experiment. Siffre had not. In his own timeline, the ending had arrived weeks too early. Every real second had still happened. His heart had beaten through them. His body had consumed food and energy. He had slept, woken, thought, written, and waited. Nothing had literally vanished. And yet, when his mind tried to locate itself in the calendar, part of that elapsed time was missing. This is the point where Siffre's story reaches beyond the cave. You do not need to live underground to experience a weaker version of the same conflict. Think of a repetitive vacation that somehow vanished, while one packed weekend feels enormous in memory. Think of waiting in a silent room for 10 minutes and feeling every second, then realizing that an uneventful month has blurred into almost nothing. Think of jet lag, when the clock on the wall, the sunlight outside, and your body's expectation of sleep all disagree. Ordinary life contains small mismatches between biological time, clock time, attention, and remembered time. Usually the world corrects them before they become dramatic. The cave did the opposite. It removed the corrections. That is the deeper answer to the question Siffre carried underground. What happens when a person loses external time? The body does not simply stop. nor does the mind become instantly timeless. Instead, the systems that normally cooperate begin to drift apart. Your biological rhythm can keep running. Your short estimates can become distorted. Your memories can lose landmarks. Your schedule can slide away from everyone else's. And because these changes happen at different levels, you may not even notice how far the separation has gone until someone outside tells you the date. That is what happened to Michel Siffre. He entered the cave thinking he was removing clocks from his environment. What he really removed was a huge part of the structure that time feels stable. The experiment ended on September 14. Siffre believed it was August 20. The missing 25 days were not missing from the universe. They were missing from the map his mind had built of it. And that may be the strangest lesson of the cave. We live by clocks, but we do not experience time with one.